I do not wish to anybody to see the horrors of war that I saw. And I still feel that the consequences of war are a disaster, not only for the country that is at war, but for the whole of humanity. We all are part of each other.
Medieval Arab geographers originally described this land, long a meeting place between northern Arabs and southern Africans, as Bilad, or the land of the blacks. Sudan, the largest country in Africa, has geographically and climatically a hostile environment. The territory is divided into three natural regions: a rock desert of the Sahara in the north, covering some 30% of Sudan, a vast semi-arid region of steppes and low mountains in central Sudan, to a region of extensive swamps and rainforests in the south. The earliest inhabitants of the Sudan can be traced to African tribes who lived in the Nile Valley south of the first Nile cataract.
In Roman times, this territory was inhabited by nomads, pagans whose religion was a mixture of the Egyptian, Roman, and of local elements. At the beginning of the 6th century, in the northern part of the Sudan, three kingdoms were formed. These three kingdoms were christened in the first half of the 6th century by missionaries who arrived there, sent by the Byzantine Caesar Justinian and his wife Theodora. At the turn of the 6th and 7th centuries, these three kingdoms united into one strong Christian country, then known as the Kingdom of Nubia.
The new religion appears to have been adopted with enthusiasm. Christian churches sprung up along the Nile, and the ancient pagan temples were rebuilt as churches to accommodate the constantly growing number of Christian worshippers.
Archaeological sites discovered and run by Polish archaeologists in Faras indicate that a Christian church existed in this city as early as the first half of the 5th century.
Nubia was a very well-organized kingdom in which the church played a major role as guardian of national traditions and language. The archaeological discoveries of a considerable quantity of manuscripts and inscriptions of magnificent frescoes leave very little doubt that Nubia remained true to Byzantine Christian traditions and was a cultural offshoot of Byzantium.
Nubia was a well-organized and well-governed, rich and Christian country which maintained, if we can say so, a relationship of equal rights with Muslim Egypt.
The 13th century witnessed Saladin's annexation of Nubia and a consequent purge in which many local bishops were tortured and killed. Christians were persecuted, and churches were converted into mosques. Although the Muslim presence was strengthened, this was not yet the end of Christianity in this land.
Groups of Christians in Nubia definitely existed long after the country's collapse. The countryside was certainly Christian. There is evidence of the existence of Christian people on this land still in the 14th century, and in some places, even in the 15th century. When Christianity finally disappeared from Nubia, we do not know exactly. Probably it happened in the 16th century.
The Egyptian viceroy Muhammad Ali restored Christianity's presence with the reconquering of Sudan in the 1820s. Notwithstanding the dominance of Islam, the next 20 years saw the gradual restoration of the Catholic Church in Khartoum with the foundation of the first Catholic convents and clinics. In 1857, Father Daniel Koboni developed a missionary outreach from Khartoum down the Nile to southern Sudan. Baptisms and conversions multiplied, as did the number of Catholic hospitals, schools, and seminaries. In 1956, Sudan proclaimed independence with an elected representative parliament. But the joy of self-determination was fleeting. Sudan reverted to totalitarian rule with the military coup d'etat in 1958. And with this, a dark chapter for Christianity began. In the name of national unity, army officers introduced measures designed to facilitate the spread of Islam and the Arabic language. Education was shifted from the English curriculum of the Christian missionaries to an Arabic Islamic orientation. Finally, foreign Christian missionaries were expelled.
When the British left, the British and the Egyptians left in 1957, the government took over the schools and left the churches only with the seminary for the training of the local clergy, the catechetical center for the training of catechists. That was all.
In the morning, since they surrounded the mission with heavy artillery pointed on 4 directions, north, south, east, and west, and they were firing like children playing games. Ding, 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 ding. And so the whole mission was full of gun and smoke.
When the missionaries were expelled, the people realized that they were going to be made by force Muslim. Nearly the whole area wanted to be baptized as Catholic. And Even the one we counted not as Catholic, they are baptized Catholic, although they are not instructed. So let us say 90% of the population of the diocese are baptized Catholic.
The following 15 years saw a series of power struggles develop in Khartoum between a succession of Arab factions. Meanwhile, in the south, out of an increasing concern for Arab hegemony over southern Sudan, previously fractured ethnic tribes coalesced to form an independence movement and guerrilla resistance opposed to the Arab rulers. Finally, in 1972, the southern rebel forces, united under General Joseph Lagou, obtained regional autonomy for Sudan's southern provinces through a peace agreement with the government in Addis Ababa. The agreed federation forged a relationship of relative harmony between Christians and Muslims, between Arabs and Africans that lasted for over 10 years.
On the day that he announced that the peace agreement has been reached and the South would be now an autonomous region in the Sudan, it seemed as if there was no hatred at all, no anger in anybody at all. Everybody was so happy. The Northerners were celebrating, the Southerners were celebrating. I mean, when the political, when there is a right political guidance, people will live peacefully.
Nie widać żadnych różnic religijnych między przeciętnymi mieszkańcami.
There are no visible religious differences between ordinary people. Sudan is a wonderful country where Muslims and Christians used quite simply to live in symbiosis, where they not only lived together, but also helped each other. It was a big surprise for me when, having just arrived in Wau in 1990, on my first Christmas there, I saw all the Muslim leaders sitting in the first pew participating in the Christmas Mass. At the sign of peace, they came to the altar and the presbytery, and they hugged and kissed the bishop and all the priests. There were no differences between us. The same happened when the Ramadan feast came. We went to the Muslim homes for their traditional breakfast together. It was a big joy for everybody. Muslim children came to Christian families and received sweets and cakes, while Christian children were welcomed by Muslim families and received sweets and fruit during the feast of Ramadan.
I remember one family which I knew very well. The daughter was a religious nun. The mother was a Muslim, and the father was a Christian. Now, when the mother, who was a Muslim, wanted to pray in the way of Muslims, this daughter, who was a nun, went to collect the mat for her to pray. And when the daughter was going to pray, the mother, who was a Muslim, was hearing the bell of the church, was telling to the daughter, "Daughter, go to pray."
But as on previous occasions, the joy of the Sudanese people was brief. In 1983, the Khartoum government, forced by a growing presence of the Muslim Brotherhood, a radical fundamentalist movement from neighboring Islamic countries, modified the nation's laws in accordance with Islamic law and introduced the Sharia. In addition to the construction of mosques and Islamic schools through the Department of Religious Affairs, a program of indoctrination was introduced, particularly in the social and educational fields.
The whole idea, of course, was so that through education, they would Islamize the population. And little by little, the influence of the church would be reduced maybe to some rural people, illiterate people. That was the idea. One nation, one language, one religion. And it still is. It still is.
Syllabuses for instance, of the primary schools have been completely changed and really is Islamized. I mean, to learn Arabic means you must learn the Quran now. And even mathematics, you have quotations from the Quran and so on. Even the history books have been sort of distorted. I mean, the long history of the Sudan as a Christian country has just been cut off out of the history, so that the young people of today do not know what is the real history of their country. A child that doesn't have the support in the parish or in the family, at the end of the education will turn out to be a Muslim.
Soon, however, re-education through books was overtaken by the greater threat of re-education by force, as evidenced by the increasing flow of weapons from neighboring Islamic countries to the Sudanese government.
They have declared an Islamic law, that is to fight a war against the enemies in the south. So in the beginning, they were being supported by the Islamic fundamentalist country, like Iran, Iraq, and many other Islamic fundamentalist countries.
In the face of creeping oppression, guerrillas made up of southern ethnic tribes once again united under a blanket organization called the Sudan People's Liberation Army, the SPLA. Increasing tensions between the Islamic North and the animist and Christian South hurtled towards its logical conclusion with war erupting in the Sudan in 1983.
Jihad, holy war. And this holy war is against the Christians. And the Christians are considered to be in the south. That's one thing why the bombs are falling even on the church. And then the war also is racial against the black in the south, And the bombardment also is a terrorism in order to frighten the people to leave the country. And as you know that these people, they won. They say the south should be even ready to clear away the people and leave the south as a bread basket for the Arab world.
The regimes in Khartoum, and especially the current regime, has always been bent on making Sudan a country which is Islamic in religion and Arab in culture. So wherever all these troops of the government went, they also went as missionaries, evangelizers of the Muslims to convert everybody, including Christian, into Islam.
The war escalated quickly. The northern Sudanese army was composed of a small ideological corps of war-tested Mujahideen guerrillas, a militia made up of ethnic tribes whose payment was simply what they could loot, and finally of raw recruits, young men who signed up in a religious fervor for the great cause of Allah. These raw, often uneducated recruits, the bulk of the Northern Army, were not prepared for the reality of a fraternal war where divisions lay only in color and creed.
They come to the south with false ideas, and only then, after seeing the situation there, are very surprised when they discover that what they had been told in the north is a lie.
Suddenly, for the approximately 8 million predominantly poor cattle herders of southern Sudan, the daily difficulty of existence was compounded by the human misery of war.
So it's a population which has been hardest hit. The recent famine of 1998 destroyed something like 300,000 people, which is a famine caused by the war principally. People have been uprooted, the cattle taken from them, their villages destroyed, there's no food, no security.
Perhaps the most devastating psychological aspect of the war are the bombing raids. As locals indicate, monkeys and dogs signal the first alert sensing, 15 minutes ahead, the arrival of the Russian-built Antonov bombers. The bombs of choice are cluster bombs, which explode upon impact, sending heavy shards of metal careening throughout the impact zone. Although nominally destined for military targets, the bombing is more often than not indiscriminate.
The most frightening experience of the war recently is the noise of this Antonov, which flies very high, which the people can tell from a long distance is the Antonov. It freezes them, it paralyzes them, it almost stops the blood flow in their veins.
The government said it is going to bomb military targets. But the truth is, it is bombing at random. It is always the town, the hospitals, the schools, the churches. The bomber Antonov just comes to scatter people during the mass. Sometimes it comes at a time in which we are making announcements, and then the only announcement is that the Antonov is coming, please, you better go to hide. And sometimes we are obliged to postpone it to celebrate at night.
Bombings happen all the time. For instance, today there was 2 bombs falling in Pedit. It's not a bombing campaign as we know it. It is more like a terror. 3 bombs, 5 bombs, 12 bombs. It's not a massive bombing force. It's one aircraft circles around, drones around, and the people are terrified.
On the 27th of December 2000, at around 3:30, we heard the sound of a plane, an Antonov. When it came, we thought it's an NGO plane, but then it started to bomb. We ran. I ran to the trench, and my elder son and my wife ran too. The first bomb didn't injure me. Later, the following one did. Then I fainted and remember no more. In the morning, the car came and took me to Yei Hospital. I was in a very bad shape. The power of God helped me. Bullets remain in my body to this day. This is our house, and that is the trench where we can hide from Antonov bullets. That is what saved us from Antonovs. Because if you are inside the trench and bombs fall, you will be safe and never injured, unless the bomb falls on the trench.
Often in war, it is the weak and innocent who are touched by the finger of tragedy. With the majority of men having joined or been conscripted into the resistance, the inability to harvest and the ever-present readiness to flee, fatigue, drought, and finally starvation stalk the women and children.
But they are even more afraid of the ground fighting, because they know that when that comes, they have to run. They have to leave all their property, they have to leave all the crops that they have collected, their animals will be looted, and they never know when they will come back. They live day by day, not knowing what tomorrow will bring.
We would like also to tell you that indeed we are in great suffering. We are like the burning bush in Moses' time. As a result of this war, which brings a lot of confusion, disturbance, and distraction to the resources of the southern Sudan. You see that most of the children are orphans. Many widows stroke widowers. Some young and old people are handicapped as a result of the bombardment by the Antonov. You find that no proper functioning schools, no well-equipped institutions for teachers, nurses, to mention but a few. No enough hospitals, dispensaries. The communication system and transport are poor. Agriculture, which is our backbone, has come to stand still due to lack of tools, which causes poverty, all of which retard the development both spiritually and materially.
The government does not care whether people are dying or not. If people die, Africans die, it is better for it, for its own long-term policies.
Compounding the plight of women and children has been the development of the slave trade. According to numerous international human rights agencies, including the United Nations, government soldiers and militia continue to raid African villages in the south and Nuba Mountains, capturing children and women to be sold into slavery, often for the price of $15 per head. The Catholic Bishops' Conference in southern Sudan has said that the slave trade is a national shame, symbolic of the greater genocide of the African by the Arab. Also telling remains the fact that the Arab name for the African race in Sudan is Abid, meaning slave.
Women are being abducted and raped and taken into slavery as sexual slaves, as labor, as hard labor slaves. Now these things need to be publicized. These things need to be known.
Our people are not able to raise their voice, to assert their rights. They do not even believe that they have human rights. They believe that slavery can't continue. They believe that war is a way of life for them as Sudanese. They are people who have been born victim of poverty, and they feel that poverty is the way to live and that there is no way out of it.
In the 1980s, exploration revealed rich oil fields in southern Sudan. For a country with a foreign debt of $15 billion, the discovery fueled the intensity of the war. Regions previously ethnically cleansed for religious and military purposes were now cleansed for economic reasons.
2 days ago, we were evacuated from that place that I call Nial, because there was a voice, an alarm, that the Arabs were coming towards our place, and all NGOs, UN, UNICEF, FAO, COSB, and many others, Rada Barnard, and so on, and we ourselves, the missionaries, we were evacuated. We were given just 20 minutes to evacuate. They really destroy everything. Everything comes to ashes. In other places of our mission, the attacks are still going on there. The government is trying to cover all these places and distribute to different companies. As you can see here, Total, FINA from Canada, and then Sweden, and CNPC from China, OMB from Austria.
And there are legions of nations establishing their embassies in Khartoum for the sake of oil. This will prevent the dealing of peace. It is more in their favor to prolong the war and continue to extract the oil, which is mostly in the south, rather than coming to terms of peace.
What we are afraid of is that the revenue of this oil will be used to buy more arms to carry on in the war.
Over 1 million African Sudanese have been forced to seek refuge in neighboring countries. Even those who managed to flee were not spared the ravages of local crime.
When we escaped leaving to save our lives, we went to exile Uganda. When we reached Uganda, Gorogoro, the Uganda rebels, came to our displaced camp. What they did to us, they made raping, looting, cutting off our ears, lips, nose, and other things. So we decided to come back to our motherland. We are displaced people. We have no food, no medical assistance here. People are suffering, walking naked, no saucepans for cooking and other things.
I always say that is a big action of providence, that these people are able to survive. I think there's much solidarity also among the people, that they share even the little that they have. But otherwise, many people go without food. People even in the parishes sometimes say, these 3 days I've not eaten anything at all.
Perhaps one of the greatest mysteries for the Sudanese people is not the war, but the silence in which it is shrouded. The sentiment is one of bewilderment, that a world so concerned with human rights should ignore a war in which, of a total population of 31 million, over 3 million people have been killed and over 5 million people displaced.
We are wondering why in Bosnia, in Europe, and I saw the kind of attitude, the way people reacted, how enthusiastic, how eager, how everybody was there to see that the problem was solved. In our case, it is going on, and it is becoming very bad. A lot of bombing and a lot of people dying and so on. And we cry. It looks like the biblical saying, we cry and you do not cry with us. We sing and dance and you do not answer. We are wondering what is happening, really.
And nobody is paying attention to us because we are being victimized for the interest that is in the Sudan. And if the world become a world only of interest, then we are in for disaster. Today is Southern Sudan, tomorrow will be another country. We are not prophets, but where there is no interest, there will be no assistance going there. Humanitarian is becoming a lie, because a human being could be dying. If I get no interest from that human being, I'm ready to say let him die because there is no interest. And this international community cannot avoid the blame of letting the war in Sudan to go too long. They are to blame, and they must be responsible about it. They cannot run away from it. They can try to defend what they want, but they are guilty of keeping silent in the situation of Southern Sudan.
Fears for the safety of infrastructure and personnel have driven many international aid organizations and non-governmental organizations from the Sudan. One which remains and continues to help is the international Catholic charity Aid to the Church in Need.
And one again admires how, day to day, thanks to the church, thanks to a recently newly opened health center, to new schools that slowly but surely rise from the ground, to a pastoral center that lives, the church helps to build up confidence in a population that has been afflicted by an intolerable suffering filled with distress and poverty.
There's no time for the ordinary people. Nobody else take care of the ordinary people except the church, except the church. And this is the area where we would like Church in Need and other organizations to help us, let the people, help the people have some assistance.
While the South suffers the violent assault of war, in the Islamized North, Christians suffer another violence of sorts, one of an ongoing Islamic propaganda and re-education campaign.
There is also psychological persecution, then sociological persecution, which doesn't include physical suffering, but it creates such a mental restriction on the behavior of people that sometimes it is more painful even than death.
There is discrimination even you get in the factories. For instance, if there is a job opportunity advertised in a newspaper and people apply, I'm sure that if 5 who did apply, 5 are Christians and 1 is a Muslim, the Muslim will get the job. He gets the upper hand in the state of the Christians. There are no Christians owning industries. There are no Christians owning enterprises which are recognizable in the society, in the Sudanese society. I mean, on this alone, you see that there is always somebody whose voice is heard more than the voice of the Christians.
For some Southerners, the solution to economic survival often necessitates a daily conversion from Christianity to Islam and back again.
Money is being used practically to buy Christians. If you want food, you want money, you change your faith. You change your name. I'm Paulino, you might be called Omar, so that you can receive money. You can receive food.
And so there have been cases of people who, on Fridays, you find them in the mosque, on Sundays, they are in the church. Laughingly, one was asked, what is wrong with you? You go here and there. And he said, when I need money, I'll go to the mosque. When I need God, I go to the church.
Sudan is a living example that helps understand that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of faith. Contrary to the imagination, despite the violence, poverty, and suffering, the persecution of the Sudanese people has provoked a return to faith. Piety is expressed in the midst of war, as the crosses engraved into tree trunks and the green cathedrals, forest chapels built in flight attest.
Faith is strong because it is being attacked. You know, the Christian faith in Sudan today is being very vigorously and very strongly attacked by Islam. And therefore the people are obliged to defend themselves because they don't want to be Islamized. And therefore this breaks out into the desire to learn more about their Christian faith, to deepen their knowledge of the Bible. Sacramental life is on the increase, and participation in liturgical activities is very, very high, especially among the youth, among the young people.
I don't want anybody forcing me to be what I am not, saying, I want you to be a Muslim, not a Christian. When I was in WOW, I could have become a Muslim. We were imprisoned in groups there and asked to denounce our Christian faith, but we kept on professing that we would never abandon Jesus.
The church in Sudan is going to be a very strong church because the youth now are so strong and so fervent. So there is hope very, very much. In fact, because of war, people have come to put their trust all in the church as the only way ahead. That is their voice, and that defends them, defends their rights. So people are with the church. And maybe that is also the source of strength for us, their pastors, their bishop. Because when things come to be difficult, the people say, Bishop, take courage, you go ahead. We are present, we shall work together with you.
I believe that faced with the magnitude of a situation generated by 18 years of this Sudanese war, a war in which so many interests are being played out, a miracle must be the petition of our daily prayers. As today we cannot see, from a human perspective, a response to this conflict, and no solution is in sight. Although you are coming from far, from Rome, Italy, America, or Great Britain, we are one. We are all the same. Christianity knows no boundaries. We have to love each other, as Jesus said, love each other as I love you. This message is a commitment given to us, which we continue to carry, we continue to practice. Whether you are white, even if an Arab, and you come here, we will love you because we are all the same, all one. All we have to offer you is our gratitude and prayers.
With financial interests guiding politics, the chances for peace continue to fade, and at the center, with nowhere left to go, are the Sudanese people.